in several flood-stricken areas in Mozambique remains dire. South African relief agencies in the country to distribute aid to the thousands of people affected. Around 70 people have reportedly died.
Popular tourist destination, but against this backdrop, dire poverty. 65-year-old Katicha Ahmad lives on the banks of the Limpopo River. She survived the 2000 floods in Mozambique. She's one of many setting up temporary shelter here.
I am poor. I haven't eaten in days. I'm not working. I'm asking government to help. They've given others, but not me.
Gift of the Givers and the SANDF have been distributing much-needed supplies in worse-affected areas like Shai and Chokwe. They'll remain here for the next few days.
Everybody thinks that it's only the place where the displaced refugees are, and all the agencies are going there. He and his disaster management team told me there's still many, many people who are trapped, who are still stuck, who need to get out. They don't have access to food, they don't have access to water, and they're in islands. They need to get out.
During the 2000 floods, more than 700 lives were lost. Gillian Pillay, SABC News, Shai, Mozambique.
Welcome back. You're watching the news at 7. Dozens of children in northern and southern Mozambique have been orphaned after ravaging floods from torrential downpours. Tens of thousands of people have been left destitute. Close to 90 people have died. More rains are forecast and there are fears water levels could rise again.
Early childhood should be carefree, but dozens of children here have been forced to grow up after near-death experiences and in many cases losing parents. This 11-year-old watched as a mother was swept away by raging flood waters. A nightmare that torments her every day. Fighting back the tears, she recounts the details of that day. She clung to a tree for hours until she was rescued.
I saw my mother and grandfather being swept away by the water.
There are dozens of others like her, some as young as 2. The oldest one here is 13.
The water just came, and that's how I lost my parents. It's painful now because I don't have parents.
The children are being offered shelter at this temporary camp.
The rescue personnel found the children holding onto trees. They were put into a boat and brought here.
A little distance away, the last phase of the relief aid distributions continues. Gift of the Givers has been in northern and southern Mozambique for the past week. It delivered 200 tons of relief aid to thousands of displaced flood victims. But much more needs to be done to ease their plight. And for these children, an uncertain future, which many may have to walk alone. Gillian Pillay, SABC News, Mozambique.
Hundreds more people, including children, are fleeing their homes in low-lying areas in southern Mozambique. Heavy downpours in neighboring countries have contributed to rising water levels in that country. 3 weeks ago, tens of thousands were forced to flee their homes due to floods. Close to 80 have died.
More than 2 weeks on, and waters here have still not receded. It's a situation that has authorities worried about possible waterborne diseases. It's in areas like this where locals have had to flee to higher ground, adapting to their circumstances. Games provide a temporary escape from events of the past 3 weeks. This camp is a place many now call home. There are just over 140 children here. For their parents, a sense of helplessness. Authorities are exploring contingency plans for those living along riverbanks.
We are looking at relocating locals living in low-lying areas to safer locations.
A 30-member SANDF team is part of the mission, among them medics.
To identify the need, the dietary needs, and see the locals how can we suggest the distribution of foods, because you find that people are undernutritioned or they have issues like kwashiorkor, And obviously, you know, there's flies, there's mosquitoes, there's rats. So we need to know how can we battle in like issues like when we store all the food. Are there rats where we store the food?
Hundreds have received medical attention. Just over a quarter of the 200 tons of relief aid has been distributed. But many more areas remain inaccessible as a result of rising water levels. Gift of the Givers is hoping to use boats and helicopters to reach them. Gillian Pillay, SABC News in Mozambique.
NGO Gift of the Givers has halted delivering much-needed aid at one of the biggest relief camps in Chokwe, south of Mozambique. Heavy rains displaced thousands, leaving a trail of destruction. Close to 80 people have died. Shai and Chokwe are some of the worst affected areas. A 25-member SANDF team is supporting the NGO.
It's one of the biggest aid camps. Aleta Matabele and her 3 children have been living here for the past 2 weeks. Like hundreds of others, she too fled her home as flood waters rose. She's been placed on a list to receive aid. The majority may not get any, and many have not eaten in days.
When people go to the person distributing food, he says there's no food and makes excuses.
Several humanitarian agencies have set up camp here, but some are exploiting the crisis. There have been several reports of fraud. The situation here is one of desperation and helplessness. Now, much needed food aid has been withdrawn from this camp after NGO Gift of the Givers uncovered planned, organized and controlled theft of aid by camp administrators.
It was a fictitious list with people who really needed aid were not there. The problem in this kind of crisis situations is that eventually after 7 and 8 days, the weakest ones, meaning women and children, women who are lactating, who are pregnant, who got breastfeeding children, don't have energy. And when they don't have energy, they get left behind in the back. And when that happens, they can't fight their way to the front to get the food.
It's a mammoth task to ensure help gets to the needy. At a smaller camp, several kilometers away, aid is welcomed.
I don't want the food to be given to me. So what we have to do, we have to give the people give the food directly to the people, hand by hand. So because they are very needy people and we really have to help them. We don't have to keep the food.
But for thousands like Aleta Matabele, the greed of some administrators has come at a heavy cost. Gillian Pillay, SABC News, Chokwe, Mozambique.
To other news, scores of people are feared trapped in their homes after incessant rains flooded several parts of southern Mozambique. Jai and Chokwe are among the hardest hit areas. Tens of thousands of people have been displaced. Close to 80 people have died.
It's been a grueling few weeks for those affected by the floods. Events this first-time mother will never forget. Heavily pregnant, she fled the floods and walked more than 15 kilometers to this camp where she gave birth.
I left my home running. When I got here, I gave birth. I don't have food and I haven't seen a doctor since then.
The interim camp is one of 3. It's inundated with people in desperate need of aid. Many here have lost everything.
I have nothing. I will be happy if I can get a wheelchair or any other form of help.
But there's only so much relief agencies can do.
A main challenge is food distribution. Right now they minimize trying to provide at least one meal for every family, and they achieve that, and sometimes some families can also get a little bit more, but still of course there is not enough.
Aid is yet to reach one of the hardest hit areas, Chokwe. The extent of the damage is clearly visible. An unbearable smell permeates the town. Many here are trying to salvage the little they have left. NGO Gift of the Givers is expecting to distribute food aid here tomorrow. It will be enough to keep families going for a month, but much more help is needed. Gillian Pillay, SABC News, Chokwe, Mozambique.